Tabular history. The history of the tabular model started with Vertipack. This is Microsoft's answer to in-memory engines that are starting to dominate the database world, including the business intelligence realm. The use of xVelocity started in PowerPivot, which is embedded in Excel, and then it was released on an enterprise level with SQL Server 2012. The tabular model adopted the features and internals of PowerPivot with xVelocity. This is not a continuation or change in the multidimensional cube or the OLAP system. This is something brand new and added in addition to the cube service. Now, the installation of analysis services has three choices. The first is the multidimensional cube, the second is the tabular model, and last is the SharePoint integration with PowerPivot. The development is done differently than cubes. Most of the industry believes that cube development was too complicated, so Tabular was created to simplify the development work. Even though most believe it is easier, the multidimensional system still has more enterprise-level features. With the release of 2014, more has been added to the tabular module, and the future of 2016 release with Power BI shows that Microsoft is gearing the enterprise-level features for this version of analysis services. There is no driving force to calling tabular model cubes, but some people still do. The references to this new option is either tables or tabular rather than the word cube. We will reference the tabular model or semantic model when talking about this version of SQL Server analysis services. So how do we get started with the tabular module? The first part is with configuration. Before you start to create a tabular model, you'll need to want to check the configuration to make sure there's development instance to create and modify is what's called a workspace database. This is a requirement for developing in a tabular module project. This is a temporary analysis services database where all the work is done and saved. The new project you create will need to be connected to this tabular instance in order to push the changes as you make them. The Analysis Services Tabular module creates this workspace database to make in-memory changes to the model as they're being created. A local instance works best for faster development. The following options are found by going to the Tools option menu choice in SQL Server Data Tools. The settings are under Options for Analysis Service Tabular Designers. The first one we'll look at is the retention area. The first option under there is Keep in Memory. This works best when a local instance is used, and that's why it's recommended for local workspace. The next one is Not in Memory but on Disk. This is best used when you have a remote development instance that is not your local server. The last one, which is not recommended, is Delete. It's not recommended because it will have to constantly recreate the project as it's opened back up when you finish working. So when you close a project and then reopen it, it'll have to deploy all over again the in-memory database. The next section is on backup or data backup. And this is really for cases or if you're prone to errors or mistakes. The first option, Keep on Disk. This helps you when you do not save the changes and the backup on disk is retrieved. Otherwise, the changes have to be reverted one at a time. So after you cancel the changes, the backup on disk will be instantly restored rather than each thing backed out. The next option, Do not back up a data on disk. It minimizes the save time. So as you're making changes, which you'll see a little later, you'll see that sometimes there's a pause while these things are saved to disk. So if you have the backup option on, it's actually putting it in memory and saving it to the backup disk. The other option under the configuration for tools and options is a test connection. Here, this option, you could test the connection to make sure the instance is running before creating a new project, and you have to have permission to this instance. The production deployment or development deployment will be done separately from the work database. You still will need proper security to connect to the database queries in the underlying data source, just like the multidimensional cube model. You want this instance to be a development or QA area before deploying to a production environment. The difference is the name of the analysis services database will be the definition in the properties of the project rather than what the workspace database is named. Lastly, there's also a default compatibility setting for version 2012 versus 2014 releases. The default here can be changed when defining a new tabular model in a project creation. You also have options for prompts when creating a new project for the compatibility level, and this is the workspace database and one for the deployment service, in addition to the one for importing a Power Pivot model into an analysis services tabular module. That's what the difference between the drop-down and the list of checkboxes are. Now let's demonstrate some of these configuration options with the tabular model. First, we'll need to launch SQL Server Data Tools. We can do this from an icon or from our Start menu. Once the Visual Studio shell has opened up, we will go to the Tools menu choice, and down on the last part of this menu, Options. We'll zip up the environment and go down to Analysis Services Tabular Designers. The first area we'll look at is the Workspace Database. Here we'll see the default instance localhost / tabular, and I'll test that connection to make sure my local instance is working. When it comes back that it is connected, then I will be able to know that it will create a workspace database. I'll click OK in this window. The next area is the workspace database retention after the model is closed. Since we're working with a local instance, we'll keep the workspace in memory. But if it wasn't on a local host, we'd want to choose Keep Workspace Database on Disk, but unload from memory. This will help when working with remote workspaces, and of course not recommended is the delete option. Unless you have fast disk and fast memory, you probably do not want to use this option. The next area is the data backup. This is where we can keep the backup of data on disk or not keep it on disk. You have to choose between what you want to do in case you're not saving the changes you make. If you want your changes saved quickly, you want the do not keep backup of data on disk. If you want the retrieval of backspacing the changes, you want to keep a backup on disk. You also have the option when creating a new project if it prompts you for the questions that we have answered on a global level. We'll check that and then click OK, and we'll create a new project. We'll go to the File menu choice, New, and Project, and when the templates come up under Business Intelligence, we'll select Analysis Services. We'll make this window a little larger so we can see all of our options, and we're going to choose Analysis Services Tabular Project. We're going to go down to the Browse button and go to our local C drive into SSAS directory where we have a tabular folder created. We'll double click that and select that folder. AdventureWorks DW14, and we'll also tell it to create a directory for the solution. When we click OK, first we get a prompt to see where we want our workspace database. Even though we set this in the tools option, it gives you the option to change this. We'll test our connection and it's okay. The next area tells us the compatibility level. Since we're on SQL Server 2014, we'll choose the second option. But if your deployment server is SQL Server 2012, you might want to revert back to the old compatibility level. We'll click that and click OK, and our new project will open up. If we go to Solution Explorer and go to our Model BIM file, right-click, go to Properties, we will see those same options. Back up to disk, direct query mode, and towards the bottom, keep in memory in our workspace server. So even though these things are set on a global level for our environment, once you create a project of the tabular model, you're able to change these options. The other one we'll look at is under Solution Explorer. We'll right-click our project and go to Properties. Here we'll see the same thing for query mode, the server to deploy, whereas the one we saw previously was for our workspace, and then the actual database name. Once we create a tabular model, we'll look at the AdventureWorks DW14 databases that are created on our instance.